Welcome back, Geeks Worldwide. This is your host, Rico, your chic of geek. You know me from Geek Wars, and that's on the Facebook page, as well as, of course, my Instagram page as well. So if you like all things geeky, whether it's sci-fi, comic books, wrestling, TV shows, movie reviews, and etc., check it out. Subscribe, like, comment, all that good jazz, and hey, you'll see things more consistently than a lot of people out there, right? So this week, what I'm going to be working on right now, I'm going to just dive into DC Comics' latest offering, which is the animated version of Superman Red Son. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of that, that just came out not too long ago, but it's also based on a graphic novel written by Mark Millar, I believe in 2003, roughly, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there. But also, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be diving into a lot of specifics about the animated offering here. So, right out the bat, you know there are spoilers. So, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. You heard it first here. If you haven't seen it and don't want to be spoiled, do not listen any further. But if you don't care, or if you've already seen it and just want to hear my opinion, you know, who does, right? Definitely let me know what's going on here in the comments below as well. So right now, that's your last spoiler alert. I'm going to dive into just a quick summary of what this actually is all about. Maybe point out a couple of things that I thought were really interesting. And at the end of this, tell me my rating on it. Just tell you if I thought it was worth it and, you know, what actually is going on there as well. So, diving right into it, Superman Red Son, if you haven't read that, it's basically kind of like an Elseworlds version of Superman's origins and what happened. The main gist of it is it's set in the Cold War era of like history and American history. It just really imagines what would have happened if Superman did not land in Kansas, United States. What if he landed in the Soviet Union? Right? Because every time, that's kind of a weird thing I brought up to people in the past, is why is it that movies and popular culture always assume everything happens here in the United States, right? So what would happen if instead of having Superman, Clark Kent, you know, with good old-fashioned American values, what if he landed somewhere else? And that's the main premise here. So the quick version of it is the young baby Kal-El, who basically launches from Krypton. Instead of landing in the United States, he lands in Mother Russia. So, basically, he's raised on a commune farm, eventually starts developing powers just like he did, but he does it over in Mother Russia. And during the course of the story, what happens is he's raised as basically the hero of the Soviet Union, right? So, if you know about Soviet history, good old Joseph Stalin raises him to be the figurehead, kind of like that figure of basically Mother Russia. Picture in Rocky 3, Ivan Drago, right? Played by Dolph Lundgren. Basically, this big, larger-than-life figurehead, somebody who actually represents what the Soviet Union is all about. So it was all about power, all about savior to the people, and being a servant of the people. What happens eventually during the course of the story is he's basically got this whole idea that I'm going to work for the people and make the world a better place. But Stalin hasn't actually been 100% real with him, upfront with him. He later finds out that there are worker camps and basically all kinds of bad things going on underneath the surface in the Soviet Union, things that Stalin has deemed necessary to keep the good old Russian machine going, right? So, kind of similar to what happened in real life in certain areas, depending on what you read and where you get that information, right? So, as the story goes forward, he confronts Stalin, that's Superman. He confronts Stalin, realizes that he's not going to change, and of all things, uses his wonderful heat vision to destroy Stalin. Yeah, you heard me right. He actually kills Stalin with his heat ray vision, and then says, you know what, I'm going to make the world a better place by myself. I'll take care of it. So, during the course of the story, what happens there is Superman, in a very, I hate to say it this way, Hitler-esque motion, he decides to slowly start taking over little areas that are under siege. He actually goes to Korea, the Korean War, and actually unites Korea under his banner. So he says, yeah, you're going to be one Korea by now. And by the way, you're under my protection. Any other country out there, little subtle hint, you're going to be needing my protection as well, so let me know what you can do and I'll take care of you, right? So he sets about to make this dystopian perfect place. I guess this is his goal. A perfect world for perfect people. So, of course, like a lot of megalomaniacs, he just believes that he's the only one who can do it, and it has to be done his way. So during the course of the story, basically what happens is, little by little, he gains more power. There's a lot of anti-Soviet feelings from Lex Luthor, who, by the way, is in this story, because it's an Elseworld story, is basically a big, powerful government guy. He's also married, of all people, to Lois Lane. Go figure. And there's a lot of things that are going on with that as well. So basically, when it comes to the story is slowly Superman gets more power. He even takes over Brainiac, of all places, and makes him his lackey, reprograms him, and actually starts making little changes like for criminals and people he deems worthy. Basically reprograms them with Brainiac's help. So there's a lot of controversy over, okay, what are you doing? Are you worse than what's been going on in history before, or it's just your version of it and not our version of it, or you versus us, USA versus Russia, kind of like it was back in the 80s and stuff like that, when during the Cold War, all that good communist stuff, and we're gonna do this faster than you, and we're gonna get to you, and we're gonna eventually take over. So yeah, that's what happens during the course of this. So it's an intriguing little way, a different remix, if you want to call it, of the Superman lore. You know, usually we're used to hearing truth, justice, and American way when it comes to Superman, because he is the America's biggest Boy Scout, as they always say. But in this case, he becomes Russia's symbol of quote-unquote freedom and working for the quote-unquote people. All right, so that's a quick version of it, okay? Now, I will say this much. One of the things I really liked about this was the alternate versions of established DC characters. So that's what I'm going to jump into right now. One of the couple of people here I'm going to talk about, Wonder Woman. Now, Wonder Woman, I thought was handled very uniquely in a sense, because she is basically a ambassador. So she's not really a superhero per se, but she's an ambassador for the island of Themyscira, which, as you know, the Amazons live on the island, right? So at one point, Superman actually hits on Wonder Woman, saying, you know, hey, we can take us back to my place type conversations, and then she kind of hints to him very subtly that essentially she is not into dudes. I'm only laughing because his reaction in the animated version was, oh, that's a relief, which I thought was kind of funny. So she kind of just hinted that, hey, you know, I lived on an island full of women and we never needed men, so you know, take it from there. So that was one part that I thought was interesting. What also was interesting was she was very more open to helping Superman. You know, he believed in his vision of, we want to unify the world. Even though my mother, Hippolyta, who is a queen, doesn't trust men, I'm open to at least trying, and I think that you're at least the only one who's at least trying to make it work. So I thought that was very interesting as well. The other character, which you knew was going to pop up here because it's a DC universe, is Batman. You know, Batman right now is a anti-hero, right? As it is. In this version of the DC universe in the Red Sun, Batman's actually a terrorist. So he's anti-Superman, anti-state, if you want to call it that, terrorist. So I thought visually he looked very cool. It was very reminiscent to how we saw in Batman v Superman, how he was kind of going at Superman on that. I thought that was very, very interesting, how they dealt with him. He basically was telling him, yeah, you're super and you're doing all this, but hey, you're really just as bad as any other regime, and I prefer anarchy than to live under you. And he literally blew up a museum full of people to prove his point. That was crazy. I mean, I was looking at that thinking, holy crap. I mean, they're actually going to do this. Which, a little side note, is why I like the animated version of DC versus the Marvel versus, but that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, Batman was basically taking on the knowledge of, hey, I can beat this guy, I figure things out, kind of like he is now, how he's the greatest detective, but he's also just beating him with his mind instead of his brute strength. So he took that tactic on him, which I thought was really amazing. Another concept that I was very surprised when I read the comic years ago, but I was pleasantly surprised that they worked it as well as they did here, was the concept of the Green Lanterns. What happened there was, and of course, like I said, they actually mixed in a lot of real life things, kind of doing an Elseworlds version of it. Good old President John F. Kennedy introduces Lex Luthor to a crashed alien ship. I guess they're trying to imply it was Area 51 in the film and also in the comics. Basically, where he found a Green Lantern who was dead. So what they did was they said, "Oh, okay, Lex Luthor, you're the smartest guy alive. Why don't you help us figure out how to use his technology?" Where Lex Luthor just decides, "Okay, give me the ring." And later in the film, you see a slew of, like a squadron of Green Lanterns just flying off to Mother Russia to attack Superman. So that was pretty awesome. I mean, they had a dogfight when it happened there in the air. I mean, they were just doing all kind of constructs. They were very organized, which I thought was kind of cool, because usually when you see the Green Lantern Corps in the comics and stuff, each guy seems to be doing their own thing. You know, they'll come up with their own weapons, their own whatever you're going to do to attack people. But in this case, I thought it was kind of cool that they seemed that they had organized training, right? So that was pretty cool. I kind of tipped off also, going back to the Lex Luthor Lois Lane dynamic. Lex Luthor, like I said earlier in the commentary here, was actually already married to Lois Lane. It looks like she was still Miss Career Woman, just like she always is, you know, but she was really into Lex Luthor for some reason. I mean, she even made a comment here to I guess her limo driver that, yeah, by the way, yeah, the sex is good. That's why I keep coming back. I'm good with it. Even though they didn't spend a lot of time together, I thought that was kind of funny. So that's why I threw that out there as well. Lex Luthor seemed, you know, pretty much his megalomaniacal, did I say that right? Self. Very high in his thoughts of himself and his ego as usual. But he seemed like he was really into the whole USA first type thing. So I'm not going to say any social commentary on current politics, but it felt like he was stoking the flames of U.S. opinion and working the crowd and all that jazz. At one point in the movie, he actually becomes president. Yeah, go figure, right? And he actually gives it up at the end of the movie, which will, you know, I don't know, I might touch on that later. But he gives it up so he can do something even better, which he doesn't really say much about, but he alludes to there's other things he wants to do to even make himself even better, even bigger than life person, right? Now, little side note that I thought was funny is minor character. If you know the regular Superman lore, you know, at the Daily Planet, the photographer buddy of Clark Kent is good old Jimmy Olsen. So he was usually portrayed as, you know, some kid, some young guy who usually gets into trouble. Superman has to save him, right? In this world, this Elseworlds of Red Sun, Jimmy Olsen is actually agent. He calls him Agent Jimmy Olsen. So he's kind of like Lex Luthor's bodyguard. So he was kind of a little more badass. They didn't really show a lot of what he actually does, other than he's Lex Luthor's right-hand man. At the end of the movie, though, he ends up being the guy that Lex Luthor says, "I'm going to give up the presidency, but I'm only going to give it up to Jimmy Olsen here." James Olsen, I guess, excuse me, because he's a president. You can't call him Jimmy. So he basically becomes president. So I guess before Barack Obama, and if this is the right world, you had our first black president in Jimmy Olsen. So yeah, there's that. One other, I call it a guest appearance, because they did, even though they didn't really say it was him. In the arms race, they got a piece of Superman's DNA at some point. Lex Luthor, just like the comics, made a clone from Superman's DNA. They called it Superior Man. So it was basically Superman with a big USA on his chest instead of just a big S or something, right? So he was really the stereotypical gung-ho American cowboy type, where he literally went to the Soviet Union to attack Superman. Went literally over there and just said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to fight this out because USA, America first." He kept saying that, so I thought that was kind of almost hilarious. But the thing about him was, and that's why I say it's kind of like a counter to the Elseworlds version of a character, he reminded me of Bizarro. And what I mean by that is he was remotely powered by Lex Luthor. Like, he was actually sitting there flying around fighting in the middle of the battle with Superman, and Lex Luthor can literally see through his eyes. He could also boost his power levels, which he kept doing even though the other scientists in the background were warning him, hey, you can't do that. You're gonna kill him. Lex Luthor was just like, okay, go ahead. Who cares? I'll do it. So he just jacked up his power. He kept getting more jacked. If you can picture from Dragon Ball Z Zor, every time Goku or Saiyan bulks up, they get more muscular and big, bulky, right? Yeah, he kept getting crazy big and crazy slurry speech. So that reminded me of Bizarro. So that's why I say it was kind of like the Bizarro version of an Elseworlds character there. Now, as far as another thing to point out, I thought that was really interesting, was a couple things that I thought were similar to other movies. So that may be a weird thing or kind of an unusual thing you're not really expecting in a kind of review here. But I thought there was a couple parallels to other things. So I mentioned earlier the Batman v Superman fight scene. It kind of felt like that in a way, because it felt like Batman lured him in this movie, very similar to Batman v Superman movie, to a secluded spot. He's talking to him real quick, and then is like, okay, by the way, surprise, you got all these weapons shooting at him and all that. So I thought that was, number one, a very interesting parallel, which I was like, okay, we've seen this before, right? The other thing I thought was interesting and I saw was similar. In the opening scene of the movie, right? This is where we see a young Clark Kent, I guess. It's not really his real name, because in Russia, obviously, they're not going to name him Clark Kent. But his young character, young Superman, is in a field with who turns out looks like Lana Lang, and he starts doing the whole thing where he discovers his powers, and he lifts a tractor and throws it and amazes Lana Lang, and he's trying to tell her, hey, I've been trying to hide this, but now lately it's been happening. I got more powers, and I'm getting more and more strong every day. So I thought that was kind of similar, and I almost laughed when I saw that. If you've seen the most recent, I want to say superhero horror movie, but Brightburn. If you've seen that, you maybe noticed that, of course, during that scene, the young boy in there basically did something very similar. He basically had an encounter with a lawnmower, which he tossed across a field, and then he basically stuck his hand into it and realized, oh shit, I'm getting powers. So I thought that was an eerie parallel to that. So even though it was a different scale, kind of different circumstances, and he has a different demeanor to him, I thought that was another parallel there. I thought it was very interesting. The third thing that I thought there, I guess the last thing I'm going to point out here, is in the very end. In the very end scene, there's a scene where Superman essentially saves the Earth, has a change of heart of how he's going to approach everything, as he's basically launching Brainiac's ship, the big skull ship that you always see in cartoons and the TV and the comics and all that. He launches it into space because it's about to blow up, and it could blow up and basically destroy the Earth, right? Well, Superman being Superman, flies it to deep, deep space as far as he can go and as fast as he can go. So he assumes, just like everybody else, that he's dead. But at the very end, during the inauguration speech for James Rhodes, where Lex Luthor decides to give up his presidency, you'll see also that he actually shows up in the crowd scene in a Clark Kent outfit. When I say that, he has glasses on, trench coat and hat, a typical old school version of how Clark Kent looked up in the comics. He basically showed up like an old school Clark Kent version, right? So I thought that was kind of interesting. He just quietly walked through the crowd, and we're I guess supposed to assume that he's going to become an anonymous guy and do something later. So it doesn't really say what's going to happen there, obviously, but it's kind of an implication. The only reason I brought that up was, for those of you, and again, I guess I'm just showing you, why I'm the Sheik of Geek, right? I look at a lot of different things. The Will Ferrell movie, an animated movie of Megamind, right? They had a hero in there who called Metro Man, who is the hero of Metro City, or Metrocity, as Megamind rather calls it. He has a very similar situation where everybody thinks he's dead, and at the very end of the movie, he has a trench coat and hat. He's walking around at the end in the crowd of this crowded scene like this, and kind of just like, okay, I'm here, but nobody knows it's me type situation. So I don't know if that was intentional or if that was just me, drawing, directions or something that isn't there, but I thought it was kind of cool. So that's it. So that's pretty much my review. That's pretty much my summary. That's what I thought was interesting about Superman Red Son. Again, I could probably talk ad nauseum about 35 other things, but I don't think you guys would really care about that. And I think right now, I'm going to just go right now and go into the actual review, the actual rating system, if that were, right? Because that's what I think you guys are interested in anyway. Out of 5 stars, dare I say, I gave it a 5. It was amazing. I thought that going into it, they would be good, because DC Comics is amazing at doing their animated joints. I mean, their live action, it's hit or miss. You can probably hear a lot of other podcasts talk about something very similar, mine including. But when you think about what they actually have done, whether it be the actual Justice League ones, the Flashpoint ones, anything that has to do with animation, DC has been very consistent about knocking them out of the park, making them very true to the comics, while basically coming up with an analytic style and an animation style that just resonates with people out there. It's very non-condescending, like it's not just for the fanboys, but it's actually grounded a lot of it in reality. Some of the language changes, so I noticed a little bit of language there sometimes. The violence level is not edited, so when someone gets shanked, they get shanked. So I'm going to tell you this much, it definitely was an eye-opener for me. I definitely will give it a 5-star rating. Definitely recommend it to everybody out there who's really interested in seeing a different kind of Superman story, and something that's original, something that's actually you can share to a lot of people, and that's my opinion. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, if you like what you hear, just definitely always feel free to comment below. Even if you don't like what you hear, if you disagree with something, I'm kind of interested in what other people's opinions are. Definitely let me know what you think about Superman Red Son, whether it be the comic, whether it be the animated version. I like hearing opinions. That's why I'm the Sheik of Geek. So definitely keep in touch with us over here. Feel free to check out the Instagram page for Geek Wars. That's GEEK, of course, and Wars spelled WARZ. You can also go to the Facebook page, look up Geek Wars, WARZ again, and you can either just go in there as a casual viewer and look at all the memes and all the newscasts and all the reviews and all the just basic conversations, or you can actually subscribe there as a member. But for this YouTube channel, for the Sheik of Geek channel, feel free to like it, just share it, please, comment away, and most importantly, subscribe. So I'm going to let you go with that one. This is Rico, your Sheik of Geek, and like I always say to all my peoples out there, so let it be written, so let it be geeked.